Our next speaker, our question that will be taken will be from Declan Kelly, who's been obviously introduced earlier on by his brother Alan. We're going to only have about three minutes on each for each speaker to come back in relation to questions that we've got and we'll give to them. So with regard to Declan, and Declan last night spoke at a conference, or gave a very again a tremendously insightful address last night to the NENA Chamber of Commerce, at which he gave his perspective as somebody who's climbed to the very highest level of business and consultancy in the United States, here in Ireland first and then in the United States. So again, it's wonderful to have that insight coming back in here today. And Declan spoke in general about some of the issues affecting the international global economy and looking at Ireland as well with that international perspective. Two things emerged from that last night, Declan. I wouldn't mind if you could perhaps elaborate on them again here. One was the need to obviously address more than assess our regulatory deficiencies. And the other one, you gave some general observations about kick-starting our economy and what needs to be done right now. So if you could perhaps give us your insights in relation to those, that would be very appreciated.
Thank you, Eugene, and good morning, everybody. I think the first thing I'd say is that I think Jim, our for the first time, has made eminent sense, and I think it would be a good idea for most people in Ireland to pay close attention to what he's saying, because I can find fault with none of it. I think there are two things that are really important from a regulatory standpoint. The regulatory framework in the United States that led to the collapse of the banking system and the collapse of the economy generally provided a very clear insight into what can really happen if you don't really understand what the dynamics are that drive the market, and how you need to frame and oversee what goes on inside the financial system on a daily basis. A lot of people who obviously are experts in this regard looking backwards, there were very few experts in this regard looking forward at the time. I see great similarities between what has happened in America and what has happened here, slightly for different reasons, but the regulatory methodology that we applied in this market made absolutely no sense whatsoever. I think going forward, to echo what Jim said, we do need to change the way the markets are regulated. I think one data point there is that I think there should be a totally different method of regulating that which affects the consumer and that which affects the institutional marketplace. And I think no longer going forward can we have a system where both of those things are regulated in a similar way. We also need to create a clear division in church and state. By that I mean we can't have a system anymore which effectively promotes the ability of lenders to lend in a circular fashion in such a robust way. Let's face it, the reason why we're in the position we're in, one of the reasons is we had banks lending money to individuals who went out and bought houses in places both in Ireland and outside the state. Those houses and those developments, both here and around Europe and everywhere else, were funded by the same banks who were funding the lenders. And then eventually, when it came to perhaps allowing those developers to go and develop properties elsewhere, they then further funded those, allowing them to use the properties that they'd lent the money to originally to serve as collateral for the extension of the borrowing over and above where they'd already been. This makes absolutely no sense. And I think we've learned a hard lesson there, but I also think that we also have a nation, as a nation, have a history of forgetting very quickly once we get out of the woods. In the past, we've been in recession. In the past, we've done things, as Jim said, to get out of recession. But as a small nation, and there are examples all over the place, where we actually, when you put the money in the hands of the consumer, it's folly to think that the consumer is going to suddenly stop and stand aside and say, you know what, I'm not going to make the same mistake I made before. Because the consumer does make that mistake over and over again and can't be blamed for doing so. So, as a small country, we have to learn the lessons of the past 3 or 4 years very quickly. And we're only probably going to get one chance to remediate this situation, to avoid having to deal with this for decades to come, never mind years. What's going on in the United States right now is I think, indicative of what needs to happen here. The American public, you know, you can say what you want about America, but unless America resolves the situation that it's in, you know, the rest of the world is going to take a long time to resolve its own individual situations. We may say that's because America caused the problem. I may argue the toss with you on that one, but at the end of the day, the bottom line is, as a country, they've defined a strategy, they've defined where they want to go, and under the new administration, they've at least determined, what that's going to be. Whether it's right or wrong, we'll wait and see. I happen to think it's got a winning chance, but at least, unlike here so far, we have determined in the United States what the strategy is going to be. I think there is a desperate need, and Paul and I are going to Dublin from here tonight to have a meeting with the Taoiseach and with Minister Cowan and Coughlin tomorrow, specifically because our business is actually in the process of advising the government on this issue. And the first thing we'll be saying is, whatever your determined plan is, and whatever your strategic vision is, and I agree with Jim, we need one urgently, we also urgently need to articulate it very quickly, because I think we're losing a lot of potential because of the vacuum that exists at the moment, where people are looking for a decision-making framework where they can know where we're going over the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, 6 months, and so forth. Now, unless we articulate that quickly, with the impending budget, we could find ourselves running out of airtime very quickly, and we can't allow that to happen. I don't know if that was the answer to the question you were asking, but I think it's probably what I wanted to say anyway.